I remember exactly where I was standing when my father said it. It was at my niece's graduation party. The whole family was gathered in the backyard. Picnic tables, balloons, those plastic folding chairs that dig into your thighs. Everyone was laughing, drinking, celebrating her full ride to Stanford. And my father, Gerald, in his usual khaki shorts and veteran's cap, lifted his glass and toasted to how far the Kalin family name has come. He always says things like that. The Kalin name. As if it's some kind of dynasty. As if we're not just a bunch of middle-class folks in Pennsylvania who eat too much potato salad at family gatherings. I walked over with a plate of food, smiling. That's my role in this family. The smiler. The nod. The black sheep who doesn't cause trouble. My son Elias was next to me. Quiet, polite, trying to disappear into his hoodie. I was genuinely proud of my niece, but I also couldn't stop thinking, Elias is just as smart. Maybe smarter. He just got accepted to 3 great universities, and he worked himself to the bone to get there while juggling a part-time job and helping me care for my mother during chemo. He didn't have tutors or private SAT prep. He had grit. He had me. So I leaned in and said casually, Dad, does Elias get a piece of the college fund too? Gerald didn't even look up from his plate. He just shook his head and muttered, Why waste it on him? He's from a broken home. That moment, it split something in me. Not because I hadn't heard worse. I had. Not because Elias hadn't been excluded before. He had. But something about how casual it was. The way he said it, like it was common sense, like it was a fact in a textbook. It snapped something I'd been holding together for 17 years. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just smiled and said nothing, the way I always do. But inside, I was burning. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Elias had been writing a speech he was going to deliver as valedictorian of his senior class. He hadn't told anyone, not even me, what he planned to say. But when that moment came, when he stepped up to the podium in his cap and gown, holding that microphone with his hands just slightly shaking, I knew something powerful was coming. I just didn't know how powerful. And when he said his final line, I turned to look at my father. Even he, Gerald Kalin, the man who once told me I ruined the family image by getting divorced, stood up. Not in applause, in shock. But before I tell you what Elias said, you need to understand something. You need to understand what it's like to raise a child in a family where love is conditional. Where tradition matters more than truth. Where being a Kalin only earns you worth if you fit the mold. My name is Naomi. I'm a single mom, a librarian, a daughter who never quite made her father proud. And this is the story of how my son, my quiet, thoughtful, underestimated son, did something no one expected, not even me. This is the story of what he said on that stage, and why that moment changed everything. Let me take you back to where this really started. Not at the graduation party, not even when Elias got his college acceptance letters, but 17 years ago. I in a cramped hospital room where I held him for the first time with one hand and signed my divorce papers with the other. Elias came into this world during what was, without a doubt, the worst time of my life. My marriage had fallen apart faster than I thought it ever could. My ex-husband Ryan cheated while I was pregnant. He moved out 2 months before Elias was born and hasn't been consistent since. Not as a father. Not even as a voice on the phone. He sends birthday texts sometimes. That's about it. My family didn't handle the news well. My mother cried more over my divorce than she did when she lost her sister. My siblings, Catherine and Joel, barely spoke to me for a while. And my father, Gerald, didn't say much at all. Just one line I'll never forget. Well, you made your bed. And maybe I did. But I made a second one. I'm 2, for Elias. and I made it warm and safe and full of stories at bedtime. Because from the moment he opened his eyes, that boy became my world. We didn't have a lot, but we had each other. I worked as a librarian, which isn't exactly a gold mine, but I loved it. I'd bring Elias with me after school, and he'd sit quietly in the kids' section reading every book he could get his hands on. By the time he was 8, he was reading at a 10th grade level. By 10, he was writing short stories that made me cry. Not just because they were good, but because they came from this quiet, watchful child who never asked for much but felt everything. He never complained when he wore thrift store clothes, never asked why we didn't go on vacations like his cousins, and he never, not once, said a word when he noticed how the family treated him differently. Because they did. Catherine and Joel's kids always had seats at the grown-up table. Elias sat with the younger ones even when he was 14. At Christmas, they'd get gift cards and video games. Elias got socks. One year, Gerald forgot to put his name on the stocking. Elias never showed it bothered him, but I saw it, in the way he'd fold his napkin 3 times before eating, in how he waited for everyone else to speak first, in how he always kept a journal in his pocket, writing down things he didn't feel safe saying out loud. I wanted to scream sometimes, to shake my family and say, "Look at him. Don't you see how remarkable he is?" But I didn't, because I thought maybe if I stayed quiet long enough, they'd come around. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The only one who truly saw Elias was my mother, Doreen. She'd sit with him, listen to his stories, call him her little professor. Even in her final year, when chemo made her weak, she'd light up when Elias walked in the room. She said he reminded her of someone, me, when I was little, before the world got loud, before I learned to shrink myself to fit inside my family's expectations. When she passed, Elias was 15. He didn't cry in public, but that night, I found one of his poems tucked into her Bible. It was titled, "The Last Woman Who Saw Me." That line. It gutted me. After she was gone, it was just us. Just me and Elias, trying to navigate a family that made us feel like extras in a movie they starred in. And yet, through all of that, through being overlooked, underappreciated, and downright dismissed, he never lashed out. He studied, he helped, he wrote, and when senior year came around, he applied to colleges without asking me for a dime. He got into every single one. So yes, when my father said, "Why waste it on him?" I smiled and said nothing. But that smile wasn't surrender. It was a promise. Because what they didn't see, what they never saw, was that my son was about to show them exactly who he was. And I knew, deep in my bones, that when that moment came, they wouldn't forget it. There are moments in life that don't just hurt. They stain. They cling to your skin, your voice, your memory. You carry them quietly for years. That moment in my father's backyard, the one where he dismissed my son's entire future with a single sentence, was one of those. Why waste it on him? He's from a broken home. He didn't say it in anger. He said it like you'd talk about the weather, like Elias's worth was just less. Obvious. Decided. I looked at my son, who had frozen mid-bite, his fork hovering over a paper plate of potato salad and ribs. He didn't flinch, didn't cry. He just looked down and kept eating. Slower this time. I wanted to grab my father's drink and pour it on his lap. I wanted to stand up and scream, "You don't know him." But I didn't. I've learned in this family, standing up for yourself just gives them more reasons to dismiss you. So I stayed seated, smiling, boiling. Later that night, I found Elias in his room typing. I asked him how he was feeling. He said, "Fine." Then a moment later, "Do you think it's true?" That question cut me deeper than anything Gerald could have said. I sat on the edge of his bed, took a breath, and said, "No, baby, What's broken is how they see the world. Not you. He nodded, but I could see the doubt crawling behind his eyes. He was already filing the moment away, another mark in the journal of things I don't say out loud. After that, something shifted. Elias started working harder, sleeping less. He was always smart, but now he was driven, obsessed. Every scholarship, every writing contest, every extra credit assignment, he chased them like they were oxygen. I worried he was running from something, not toward it. One afternoon, I came home early from work and heard him crying through the bathroom door. It wasn't loud, just quiet sobs, choked, like he was trying not to let them out. I didn't knock. I couldn't. I sat outside that door for 20 minutes with my hand on the floor, a heart in my throat, thinking, how many times have I let him feel alone just because I didn't want to rock the boat? But then slowly, I saw something else forming. He began writing again. Not just for school, but for himself. He stayed after class with his English teacher, who later told me Elias had something special. That he wasn't just smart, he was important. That his words had weight. One night over dinner, Elias said it like it was nothing. They picked me for valedictorian. I dropped my fork. Not because I was surprised, he deserved it, but because I knew what that moment meant. Not just the title, not just the honor, but the microphone, the stage, the room full of the very people who had seen him as less. I asked him, "What are you going to say?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I think I want them to hear me, really hear me." And just like that, the stakes changed. This wasn't about college funds anymore. This wasn't about Gerald. This was about Elias finding his voice in a room that had ignored it for 17 years. In the days leading up to the ceremony, I kept waiting for someone in the family to reach out, to say congratulations, to say anything, but no one did. Catherine posted a photo of her daughter's prom dress. Joel shared a picture of his new grill. But no one mentioned Elias. Not once. It didn't matter, because Elias wasn't looking for their approval anymore. He was writing his speech, and though he never let me read it, I saw the intensity in his eyes as he worked on it, the way he rewrote each sentence, the way he whispered lines to himself when he thought no one was listening. He was building something that would land like a thunderclap, and I had a feeling it wouldn't be polite. It would be the truth. The days before graduation felt strange. Not in a bad way, in a quiet before the storm kind of way. Elias was calm, but not the kind of calm that meant peace. He moved like someone with a mission, with something buried just under the surface, waiting to be released. I'd ask him how the speech was going, and he'd give me that half smile of his, the one he uses when he doesn't want to lie, but can't tell the whole truth either. "It's coming along," he said. "I just want it to matter." Matter? That word stayed with me, because I knew what he meant. He wasn't writing a speech to check a box. He wasn't trying to impress a principal or pad his college resume. He wanted to say something, to everyone, to us. And he was tired of being invisible. The night before the ceremony, I found him sitting on the porch with his journal in his lap, eyes on the stars. He looked smaller somehow, younger, like the little boy who used to ask me if I thought trees had feelings. I sat beside him and said, "You don't have to carry all of this, you know." He didn't look at me, just said, "If I don't say it now, when will I?" I nodded. "Then say it. All of it." We sat in silence after that. He didn't need a pep talk. He needed space to stand in his truth. And I wasn't going to get in the way. Earlier that week, I'd emailed the family the details of the graduation ceremony. Time, location, seating, no one responded. Not a single reply. Not even a "we'll try to make it." Not a thumbs-up emoji from Catherine, who I watched spend 3 hours that week debating the color of her new kitchen backsplash in the family group chat. I told myself it was fine. I told myself Elias didn't need them there, that we were enough. But late that night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I let myself feel the truth for just a few minutes before I pushed it back down. Because the truth was, I wanted them there. Not for me, for him. I wanted my father to sit in that auditorium and watch my son walk across that stage and feel the weight of every dismissive word he ever said. I wanted the whole family to understand what they'd written off. But they weren't coming, and I had to be okay with that. Graduation morning arrived the way big days always do, with ordinary problems. I burned my first cup of coffee. My car needed gas. Elias couldn't find the second half of his cap and gown until we discovered it still in a plastic bag shoved behind his winter coats. He was moving slowly, methodically, like he was saving energy, like a fighter who knows the bell is about to ring and isn't about to waste a single breath before then. We drove to the school mostly in silence. I had a whole speech prepared in my head, about how proud I was, about how far he'd come, about how none of the family stuff mattered and that he had already won just by standing. But every time I opened my mouth, something stopped me. Maybe it was the set of his jaw, the steadiness of his hands on his lap. He didn't need my words. He had his own. When we pulled into the school parking lot and I saw the rows of families flooding in, the grandparents with cameras, the siblings with balloons, I'm the cousins saving seats, I felt that familiar ache settle in my chest. We had none of that. Just the two of us. And that old feeling crept back. The quiet grief of being a family of two in a world built for more. I helped him straighten his gown, fixed his tassel. He looked at me with those eyes, those serious, deep eyes that had been watching the world since he was 3 years old, and he said, "Don't cry until after." I laughed. It came out shaky. "Deal," I said. He walked through those double doors, and I walked into the auditorium alone, found a seat near the middle, set my phone to video, and waited. The auditorium filled quickly. Proud parents, grandparents, little siblings bouncing in seats, teachers standing along the walls with that exhausted but satisfied look teachers get on graduation day. The energy was electric, warm, celebratory. People were snapping photos of empty chairs just to practice. I sat there holding my phone, thinking, this was it. This was the moment I'd been building toward for 17 years. Every sacrifice, every second job I almost took, every vacation we skipped, every Christmas I cried quietly in the bathroom after watching my son get socks while his cousins unwrapped game consoles. It all funneled into this single afternoon. And then I heard it. A voice behind me. "Naomi?" I turned around. It was my brother Joel, standing there in a collared shirt, holding a small bouquet of flowers, looking uncomfortable the way people look when they've done something wrong and know it. Behind him was his wife, Brenda, and their youngest daughter, Paige. I blinked. "Joel?" "Yeah," he shrugged. You looked at the flowers like he'd forgotten he was holding them. "We figured we'd come." I didn't say anything for a moment. Just stared. "We figured." Like that explained it. "Elias is valedictorian, Joel." "I know." He looked down. "I know that." Something in his expression told me the rest of the story without him having to say it. Someone had talked to him. Maybe Brenda. Maybe his conscience, which clearly still worked, even if it moved slow as molasses. They sat down 2 rows behind me. I turned back around. And then, 5 minutes before the ceremony started, I heard another voice. "Catherine." She slid into the seat beside me, smelling like that same jasmine perfume she's worn since college, and she said absolutely nothing, just sat down, crossed her ankles, smoothed her dress, and looked at the stage. I stared at her, or she glanced sideways at me. "Don't make it weird," she said. I almost laughed. Genuinely, almost laughed. But then came the voice I didn't expect. The slow shuffle of orthopedic shoes, the familiar clearing of a throat. The khaki shorts, yes, even to a graduation, and the veteran's cap pulled low over his eyes. Gerald. My father walked down the aisle of that auditorium with his hands in his pockets, spotted me, and sat down in the empty seat on my right side. He didn't look at me. He looked at the stage, and I thought, what happened? What changed? Why are you all here? But I didn't ask, because at that exact moment the lights shifted. The faculty processional music started, and somewhere behind that curtain, my son was about to walk out onto a stage and speak into a microphone in front of every person who had ever doubted him. And right here, I need to pause for just a second, because if you're still watching this video, you already know this is more than just a graduation story. This is a story about what it feels like to be seen, about what happens when the people who were supposed to believe in you didn't, about what a person becomes when they stop waiting for permission to matter. And look, I'm going to be honest with you for a moment, because that's the only kind of channel I want to run. My own mother told me no one would care about stories like this. She said I'd never reach 1,000 subscribers with content like this, that it was too emotional, too personal, too real. But I genuinely believe, that stories like Elias's are exactly what people need to hear. Because most of us have a Gerald in our lives. Most of us have sat at a table and felt invisible. Most of us have had someone look at us like we were a waste of investment. And most of us have swallowed that pain quietly, smiled, nodded, and never said what we needed to say. So if this story is hitting you somewhere, if you're nodding along because you know this feeling, hit that subscribe button right now. Not for an algorithm, for Elias, for every kid who got told they weren't worth it. Let's prove something together. Now, let's get back to this. The graduates filed into the traditional march, 2 by 2, caps on, gowns flowing, faces a mix of giddiness and disbelief. I searched the rows and found Elias near the front. Tall, composed, walking like he already knew how this day was going to end. The principal spoke first. Standard graduation speech. Opportunities ahead. High roads not yet taken. The future is yours. Then an assistant principal. Then a member of the school board who mispronounced 2 students' names. The audience politely applauded each time. And then the principal stepped back to the microphone and said, "And now, please welcome our valedictorian, a student who has demonstrated extraordinary dedication, intellectual curiosity, and resilience throughout his 4 years here. Please welcome Elias." The auditorium applauded. I pressed record on my phone. Elias stood up, walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, looked out at the room. He didn't start immediately. He just stood there for a moment. 3 seconds, maybe 4. And in those seconds, the room went completely quiet. Not the polite quiet of an audience waiting. The real quiet. The kind that means everyone feels something is coming. He opened his notebook, not printed pages, a handwritten notebook, his journal. And he began. I was going to give a different speech. His voice was steady, clear, not loud, but not soft either. The kind of voice that fills a room without trying. I was going to talk about perseverance and opportunity. I was going to quote a famous person. I had it drafted. It was fine. It was the kind of speech people forget before they leave the parking lot. Quiet laughter from the audience. He paused. Let it settle. But a few months ago, at a family gathering, someone said something to my mother. And I heard it. I wasn't supposed to. But I did. And it changed what I wanted to say today. The room shifted. The laughter stopped. They asked why anyone would waste money on my future. The reason they gave was that I come from a broken home. Silence. Total, full, ringing silence. I've been thinking about that word ever since. Broken. Because here's the thing about broken things. A broken compass still has all its parts. A broken watch, if you look close enough, still has every gear. It's just waiting for someone to wind it. He paused. Let that sit. I grew up in what some people would call a broken home. My dad wasn't around. We didn't have a lot of money. I wore secondhand clothes. I worked part-time through junior year to help my mom, and for a long time I thought that meant something was wrong with me, that I was, fundamentally, less. He closed his eyes for just a breath, then opened them. But here's what they never told me. Here's what no one in my family ever bothered to say. The homes that are called broken are usually just the honest ones. Because something real happened there. Something broke, yes. But also, something survived. And in my home, the thing that survived was me. Somewhere in the auditorium, someone started to cry. I could hear it. A single quiet sob from somewhere to my right. I looked at my father. Gerald was sitting completely still. His veteran's cap was in his hands now, turning it slowly by the brim. I want to talk about my mother for a minute. His voice caught slightly on that word, mother, and the room held its breath. Because she is the reason I'm standing here. Not money, not connections, not a family college fund. He looked up from his notebook and directly into the crowd. Her. A woman who worked as a librarian. I drove a car held together by optimism, sat outside a bathroom door when she thought I couldn't hear her, and never once, not once, made me feel like a burden. I pressed my fingers over my mouth. I had promised not to cry until after. I was already failing. She took me to that library where she worked, and she let me sit in the kids' section and read everything. She didn't limit me. She didn't tell me what I was allowed to want. She just said, read. And I did. And the books told me that the world was bigger than the room I was sitting in. That the story wasn't over. That the people who tried to write you off were never the ones holding the pen. He paused. I also want to talk about someone else. The room got even quieter. My grandmother, Doreen. She passed away 2 years ago. She was the first person in this extended family who looked at me and just saw me. Not my circumstances, not my father's absence, not the story of how things went wrong. She saw me. She used to call me her little professor. And even when she was sick, even when it hurt to talk, she would ask me to read to her. His voice cracked slightly on that last word. Just slightly. He caught it, steadied himself. She didn't leave me money. She left me something more important. She left me the belief that I was worth paying attention to, that my words had value, and I have spent the last 2 years trying to be worthy of that belief. He closed his notebook. He looked out at the room without it now. No notes. Just him. To my classmates, you are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are not the label someone stuck on you when they didn't know what else to do. You are not the family you came from, or the money that wasn't there, or the people who left, or the ones who stayed and made you wish they hadn't. You are what you chose to do with all of that. And I chose this. He gestured around the room, the stage, the gown, the moment. I chose to show up, every single day, even when it was hard, even when no one clapped, even when I wondered if any of this was worth it. I chose to keep going. And I want you to know, that's not weakness. That's not luck. That's not a miracle. That's a decision. A quiet, daily, unglamorous decision to not let someone else's opinion of your value become the truth. He took a breath. Wam, to whoever told my mother that investing in me was a waste, I want you to know something. The room was so quiet I could hear the ventilation system humming. You were wrong. Not loud, not angry, just clear, like a fact. And I don't say that to embarrass you. I say it because somewhere in this room, or watching from home, there is a kid who heard something like that about themselves. And I need that kid to hear me say, someone was wrong about you too. The world needs you. The world needed me. And I almost believed it didn't. He looked down at his notebook for just a second, then up again. My name is Elias. I am the valedictorian of this class. I am the son of a librarian. I am the grandson of a woman named Doreen who saw me when no one else did. I come from what they called a broken home. And I am not broken. Silence. And then, everything. The auditorium erupted, and I do not use that word lightly. It wasn't polite graduation applause, the kind where people clap because it's time. It was the kind of applause that happens when a room full of strangers all feel the same thing at the same moment. Students stood. Teachers stood. Parents I had never met in my life were on their feet, and some of them were crying. I couldn't move. I was sitting in my chair with both hands over my mouth and tears running freely down my face. I had already broken my promise to Elias, and I could not have cared less. Watching my son stand at that podium with his chin up and his eyes clear and his back straight. And I thought, 17 years. 17 years of quiet suffering and small victories and burning in silence. And it all led here. Joel's wife Brenda was behind me sobbing openly. I could hear her. Catherine was gripping the program in her lap with both hands, knuckles white, jaw tight. She wasn't crying. Catherine never cries in public. But her face was doing something complicated. Something between guilt and awe, and something she probably didn't have a name for. And my father. I turned to look at Gerald. He was standing, not in applause, not right away. He was just standing. His veteran's cap pressed flat against his chest, like he was at attention, like he was paying some kind of formal respect. His face was unreadable in the way faces are when too many emotions try to occupy the same space at the same time. He was not the kind of man who cried. In 68 years of life, I had seen my father cry exactly once, at my mother Doreen's funeral. So I was not prepared for what I saw. His eyes were wet, not streaming, not dramatic, just wet. Like the tide had come in and he was holding very still, trying not to let it show. And I felt two things at once. I felt the victory of it. That complicated, exhausted, righteous feeling when justice arrives years too late, but arrives nonetheless. And I also felt grief. Because the version of my father who might have said I was wrong 20 years ago, who might have looked at my son without prejudice, who might have put his name on the stocking, who might have put money in the fund, that version never showed up. This version, this wet-eyed old man in khaki shorts, was what we got instead. Better late than never. But also, a lot of years, too late. The ceremony continued. Diplomas were distributed. Names were called. I watched Elias walk across the stage and shake the principal's hand and hold his diploma up, and the auditorium gave him an extra beat of applause, a recognition that something had happened today beyond the standard graduation ritual. When it was over, graduates poured out into the lobby and onto the front lawn to find their families. I pushed through the crowd looking for him, and when I found him, he was standing near the doors, gown unzipped, cap in hand, talking to a girl from his class whose mascara was thoroughly destroyed. When he saw me, he excused himself and walked over. I didn't say anything. I just hugged him. He hugged me back, and for a minute we just stood there in the middle of all that noise, all those families and cameras and balloons, and the beautiful chaos of a graduation day, and it was enough. "How was it?" he asked into my shoulder. "You made Brenda cry in public," I said. "Joel's wife. She never cries in public." He laughed. A real one, surprised out of him. And then a hand on his shoulder from behind. We both turned. Gerald. My father was standing there with his cap in both hands, turning it the way he'd been turning it in the auditorium. Up close, his eyes were still damp. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically. He was still a big man, tall, broad. But something about his posture had changed. Like a building that had been holding its shape by sheer stubbornness for decades and had finally let some of the air out. He looked at Elias for a long moment. Just looked at him. Then he said, very quietly, "You're a Kalen's son. Whether I said it right or not, you always were." Elias nodded once. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just nodded, the way you do when you've waited so long for something that by the time it arrives, you're more relieved than joyful. "Thank you, Grandpa," he said. Gerald cleared his throat, nodded back. Then he looked at me, for the first time in what felt like years, really looked at me, and he said, "You did good, Naomi." 4 words. 4 words after 17 years. And I thought, is that enough? Should that be enough? I don't know. Maybe it's not a question of enough. Maybe it's just what we had. "I know I did," I said. Not to hurt him, just because it was true. The speech spread. "I want you to understand. I did not expect this. I took a video on my phone in that auditorium. Shaky. Zoomed in, slightly too far. Audio from a distance. I posted it to my personal social media with a short caption. My son, valedictorian. I am so proud." By the next morning, it had been shared 300 times. By the end of that week, news outlets from 3 states had reached out asking if they could feature the story. A podcast producer emailed me. A local television station. 3 separate college journalism students who wanted to interview Elias about speaking truth in public spaces. And then came the email that made me sit down slowly at my kitchen table and just stare at the wall. It was from a private scholarship foundation, an organization that supports first-generation college students from single-parent households. They had seen the video. They had reached out to Elias's school, confirmed the story, verified his enrollment, and they were offering him a full supplemental scholarship. Not a full ride. He had already secured partial aid through his own applications. But enough. Enough to cover what was left. Enough to remove the financial cloud that had been hanging over our summer. Enough. I read that email 4 times before I called Elias into the kitchen. He read it. Didn't say anything for a full minute. Then he said, "That's ironic." "What is?" "They said he was from a broken home. Now strangers are paying for his education." I blinked. He smiled. That half smile again. But this time, it reached his eyes. Now, here is where the story does something I didn't expect. Because what happened next wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a big family confrontation where everyone apologized and wept and hugged and vowed to be better. Life doesn't actually work that way. And I think we've all been conditioned by stories and movies to expect a clean resolution. A big moment. The villain confesses. The family heals. The credits roll. That's not what happened. What happened was smaller. And somehow, that made it more real. Catherine called me 2 weeks after graduation. She didn't lead with an apology. She called to ask if I could recommend a good book for her youngest, who had just gotten interested in reading. I gave her the titles, the information. And at the very end, just before she hung up, she said quietly, "He really is remarkable, your boy." Then she hung up before I could respond. That was it. Joel stopped by one afternoon with a gift card to a bookstore. He handed it to me at the door, said it was for Elias, for college. $100, not a fortune, but it was something. It was Joel looking at what he'd done, or more accurately, what he'd failed to do, and trying in his small, clumsy way to close some of the gap. I took it. I didn't make him feel worse about how late it was. That's not the same as forgiving him on his timeline. It just meant I wasn't going to burn down what remained over what was already gone. And Gerald. My father called me on a Tuesday afternoon, which is notable because my father doesn't call in the middle of the day. He asked how Elias was preparing for school. I told him he was making lists, organizing, nervous in that way you can't quite see but you can feel. Gerald said, "Tell him to trust himself. He clearly has good instincts." That was the most emotionally generous sentence my father had said to me in 20 years. It wasn't everything. It wasn't a real apology, the kind that holds all the years in it and breaks under the weight of what was said and not said. But it was a start. And I was 41 years old and exhausted. Maybe, just maybe, ready to accept that some people don't give you the apology you need. They give you the version they're capable of. And you decide what to do with that. The night before he left for school, we stayed up late. We ordered pizza, sat on the couch, watched old nature documentaries the way we used to when he was little, and I'd let him stay up past his bedtime. And somewhere around midnight, when he should have been sleeping, he said something I've been carrying ever since. "Mom, can I tell you something about the speech?" I said yes. I wrote it because of Grandma Doreen, not because of Grandpa Gerald. And I know it looked like it was aimed at him. But it wasn't. Not really. It was for her. Everything I said, the part about being seen, the part about being worth something, I was saying it back to her, like she could hear me. I couldn't speak. "She told me once," he continued, "the last time we talked before she got really sick. She said, 'Elias, the ones who dismiss you are never the ones you're writing for anyway. Write for the ones who already know your worth.'" He paused. I kept thinking about that. That's why I didn't write a speech for Grandpa. I wrote it for her, and for you, and honestly, for me, because I needed to hear it from myself. And I thought, this kid, this quiet, watching, journaling, feeling everything kid, he didn't give that speech to get revenge. He gave it because he had something true to say, and he finally had the room to say it. And the room happened to include everyone who had gotten it wrong. I want to say something now, directly to you. If you've been listening to this story, if it's sitting somewhere in your chest with that familiar ache, the one that comes when a story feels a little too close to home, then I want you to hear this part. Because I've been calling this a story about revenge, about justice, about a family getting what they deserved. And it is all of those things. But it's also something else. It's a story about what happens when someone decides their pain is not the end of their story, when they stop waiting for the people who failed them to be the ones who finally save them, when they realize, often late, but not too late, that the validation they'd been standing at the door waiting for was never coming from that house. Elias didn't get a family college fund. He got something harder to quantify and harder to take away. He got the knowledge that he built something without them, that he climbed that stage with his own 2 hands and his own 1,000 sleepless nights, and his mother who burned the coffee and never gave up, and his grandmother who called him her little professor. He got to stand in front of the people who underestimated him and simply tell the truth. No screaming, no drama, just truth. And the truth, it turns out, is the most powerful thing ever invented. Not because it destroys people, but because it holds a mirror up, and some people are not prepared for what they see. Gerald saw himself in that mirror. I know he did. Because when a man who has never cried in public stands in an auditorium with wet eyes and a veteran's cap pressed to his chest, something in him has broken open. And maybe, just maybe, broken open is different from broken. Maybe that's where the light gets in. I'm not going to tell you that everything is fixed now. Families don't work that way. We don't gather at Thanksgiving and skip over what was said in backyards, and what wasn't put in stockings, and what was refused when it should have been given. We carry all of it. We just try to decide which parts to carry gently and which parts to set down. What I will tell you is that Elias started college in September. He's studying literature and philosophy, which surprised no one who knew him. He calls me on Sunday afternoons and tells me about his professors, his classes, the strange and interesting people he's meeting, People from everywhere, people who came from nothing, people who were told they weren't enough, and people who proved otherwise. He still keeps a journal. He's working on something. He won't tell me what it is yet. He just says, "It's coming along, Mom. I just want it to matter." There's a question I've been asked several times since Elias's speech started circulating. People want to know, was it worth it? Was it worth all the years of staying quiet? The swallowing? The smiling when you wanted to scream? The waiting for a family to see something they refused to see? I've thought about that question a lot. Here's my honest answer. I don't know if I'd call it worth it, because worth it implies the pain was payment for the outcome. And I don't believe suffering is currency. I don't think Elias had to be dismissed for 17 years in order to give a speech that moved a room. I don't think those things are connected the way fairness would require them to be. But here is what I do believe. I believe he became who he is, partly because of the difficulty. Not instead of support. He deserved support. He deserved the fund. He deserved the stocking. He deserved the seat at the grown-up table. He deserved all of it, and he got none of it, and that is still wrong. But in the absence of those things, he built something inside himself that no fund, no gift card, no scholarship could have given him. He built certainty, the kind that comes not from being told you're valuable, but from watching yourself survive and grow and create and persist in spite of every reasonable reason not to. That kind of certainty is permanent. And the people who tried to take it from him, who said, "Why waste it?" they are the ones who have to live with the fact that they were wrong about someone remarkable. That the person they dismissed grew up to stand on a stage and tell the truth with shaking hands and a steady voice and a room full of strangers on their feet. They have to carry that. He doesn't. He's moved on. He's writing. He's learning. He's calling me on Sunday afternoons. And every time I hear his voice on the phone, easy and warm and curious the way it's always been, I think about that hospital room 17 years ago, about holding him for the first time with one hand while signing papers with the other, about wondering what kind of world I'd brought him into and whether I was enough to navigate it with him. I think I was. Not because I was perfect, not because I fought every fight or said every right thing or had every answer, but because I showed up. Every day, in the library and the kitchen, and outside the bathroom door, and in that empty auditorium seat when no one else came. I showed up, and he showed up for himself. That's the story. Not revenge exactly, not justice exactly, not closure, because closure is mostly fiction. Just truth. Just a boy who decided to stop being invisible. Just a family forced to confront what they'd been too comfortable to see. Just a mother, sitting alone in an auditorium, watching her son hold a microphone with slightly shaking hands, watching him open his mouth, watching everything change. If you made it this far, I need you to know something. This story, this specific kind of story, is not rare. There are Eliases everywhere. There are Naomis in every family, staying quiet, swallowing fire, hoping the family will eventually see what she sees. There are Geralds too, not monsters, just people so sure of their own definitions of worth that they miss the real thing sitting right in front of them. And there are Doreens, the ones who see, the ones who sit with you, the ones whose voices you carry long after they're gone. Hold on to your Doreens. Be someone else's Doreen. And if you are the person who heard something like what Elias heard, if someone looked at you and decided your future wasn't worth investing in, I want you to hear this. They were wrong. Not as a pep talk, not as a platitude, as a fact. They were wrong about you. You don't have to give a valedictorian speech to prove it. You don't have to make anyone stand up, or cry, or press a veteran's cap to their chest. You just have to keep going, keep writing, keep building, keep showing up for yourself on the days when no one else does. That's the whole secret. That's all it ever was. If this story moved you, subscribe, share this video, Leave a comment with one word that describes what you're carrying right now. I read every single one. This is a channel for people who know what it feels like to be underestimated. We're just getting started. Until next time, keep going.